Okay, so we're going to start with the Supreme Court decisions. And let's see, one of the first cases is Lawrence versus Texas, which was in March 26, 2003 to June 26, 2003. And this one, there was two petitioners, John Gundes Lawrence and Tyrone Gardner, and the respondent for this case was Texas. And this all occurred in the apartment of John Lawrence, and it was decided by Rehnquist's court. So what happened was that the Houston police, they got a call about weapons in this apartment. And so they went there and they found Lawrence and Gardner having intercourse, and they arrested both of them and charged them for violating the Texas statute, which did not allow two people of the same sex to have intercourse or anything intimate. And they were convicted of this as a crime. And so this led to the Supreme Court discussion about whether or not the petitioners, Lawrence and Gardner, were allowed to have freedom of intimacy. And this brought upon the Bowers court statement that the issue presented is whether the federal constitution refers a fundamental right upon homosexuals to engage in sodoms. And this basically means whether or not they're allowed to have intercourse. And Paul M. Smith, he is the advocate for the petitioners. And he argued against that because he said that this Bowers statement, it actually demeaned what the petitioners were saying, because basically this statement only spoke about intercourse and not about what his petitioners were actually saying, which was that their 14th Amendment of having equal protection of laws was violated. And he used an example like a married couple for this, because he said that basically this means that a married couple only got married for the sexual relations and nothing else but that. And that's what he said that the Bowers court was doing. And so for the Bowers court, it was not specifically targeted against anyone, because it was to prohibit the non-procreative sexual activity. It didn't matter whether it was man or woman, or like a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. It didn't matter, because this sodomy law, it was mainly used for non-consensual actions where they did not give consent, or they could not. So for example, like an adult with a minor and such things like that. And so this brought to the final decision that the Bowers, they made sure to reiterate that it did not mean to condemn anyone, but it ended up doing that upon further review, because that's what some states used it for. And even though their second point was that even though there was they had no procreation, it is apparent that an individual's liberty to decide who they want to have intimate relationships with. And so, the decision to convict Lawrence and Gardner, it was taken back. And so for the second case, we have Reed versus Reed. And this occurred in October 19, 1771 through October 22nd. And so it was, the appellant was Sally Reed and the appellee was Cecil Reed. And this was decided by the Burger Court, and this occurred in Idaho. So what happened was that these two, they are divorced, and they were parents of their son, their adopted son, who died at the age of 16, so he was still a minor. And so when he died, their son actually owned an estate, and they both wanted the estate. They wanted administration of the estate. But according to the Idaho probate code, males were preferred over females, and that's what started everything. So Sally, she filed a petition to the court of Ada County about it, but at the same time, Cecil, he also filed a petition, and in his court hearing, he was decided as the administrator of the state because the court said that, according to the Idaho code, there was a preference for males. And in the event that there was multiple people trying to get the land, such as in this case the mother and the father, then the preference would be males rather than females. And an analogy they used was if their son had passed away, it'd be given to the full-blooded relatives rather than to the half-blood relatives. And when this happened, Sally, she appealed to the court because she said this code violated her equal protection clause. And in that one, the court said that this needed to be further reviewed upon, and the land would go back to the probation court. But Cecil, he appealed to the courts about this, and this led to the original reinstatement of him gaining ownership of the estate. And so, in the Supreme Court, when it got to the Supreme Court, Sally claimed that the Equal Protection Clause was violated because of the mandatory preference to genders, without any regard to the qualifications that they have. So during this hearing, the Supreme Court, they made sure to note that Idaho does not prevent any woman from having ownership or administration of land, because in the event that a woman's spouse died, they had preference over any male relatives. But in this case of multiple people who had the same entitlement, it's different because males would be given preference over to the females who had the same entitlement. So it's like the situation of the Reeds, where the mother and the father both had the same right to own the land. And so when the court said this, they said the situation was like that, and because they're both trying to get administration, and they're both parents, and it did violate the Equal Protection Clause. And so their final decision was that they both have the same situations, and that different entitlement clauses there are different entitlement clauses depending on the relationship. So, for instance, different entitlement clauses would be like a father would get the land rather than to the uncle, like that. But it doesn't matter what the gender is, but there should be similar treatment to those who are in the similar situations, such as the mother and the father. And yep.